US President Donald Trump and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky have clashed at the White House over a peace plan with Russia. Joining us live is Deputy Press Secretary to President Clinton, Jim Kennedy. Jim, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, we'd love to get your take on the discussion that they did have.
Well, it was really unprecedented. You know, there's a famous German politician named Otto von Bismarck who once said that laws are like sausages. You don't want to see them being made. And the same is true with diplomacy. I think we got to look at the sausage making here, and it was a kind of an ugly sight. But what's interesting is that both of the presidents are former stars of their own TV shows, and they really put on a hell of a show today because they both were playing to the cameras, although I think it was improv. I don't think it was scripted.
And we also heard Zelensky afterwards on Fox News and host Brett Baer asking him for an apology to Donald Trump. How important do you think an apology is required from Zelensky? Because we're certainly not only hearing it from Fox News, but also a lot of other people have come out saying that as well.
Well, I think he may end up having to if he really wants to get back to the table and sign that agreement, which I think would be a good first step towards reaching a resolution here. So in some fashion or other, either privately or publicly, he may have to do that because it was really an unfortunate circumstance, which I think was exacerbated to some extent by both sides, but particularly by Zelensky, who kind of took the bait and really was not really acting in a totally appropriate manner.
What's your take on the former president from Russia, Dmitry Medvedev? He said the insolvent pig finally got a proper slapdown in the Oval Office, and Donald Trump is right. The Kyiv regime is gambling with World War III.
Well, in the short term, you know, this looks good for Putin. I'm sure he's happy about it in the short term, but I think what's more important is what happens in the long term. And I think playing the long game here could work to the benefit of, of the world if we could reach a resolution to this conflict. Both sides, I think, are suffering greatly. Both Ukraine and Russia are suffering greatly. I think Putin is more amoral and can put up with more suffering, unfortunately for his people, but needs to be driven to the negotiating table. And so both sides, I think, have to give up something in order to achieve some kind of peace.
Well, President Trump posted online regarding Zelensky. He said he can come back when he's ready for peace. So it sounds like he's open to that. And again, on Fox News, Zelensky did say that he thinks that Trump and his relationship can be salvaged. So what are you anticipating is going to happen in the next, say, 24 to 48 hours?
Well, I do think there'll be a rapprochement at some point. I'm sure President Trump was hoping to have this agreement in place because next Tuesday he's delivering, it's not called State of the Union, but in effect it's a State of the Union address to the nation. And I'm sure he had hoped to have this agreement already signed and in effect by then. Whether it could be resurrected in time for that, I'm not sure. So that kind of it'll be difficult for that to be achieved by then. But I do think they'll have to come back to the table sooner than later.
And your take on Republican Senator Lindsey Graham saying that Zelensky should resign. What do you think of that?
Well, I don't know if that's necessary at this point. I think that may not be an appropriate reaction. I think there is some division within the Republican ranks about what the proper course of action might be here. Some of the so-called MAGA enthusiasts are not really fond of Zelensky or giving too much money to Ukraine. On the other hand, a number of Republicans and many Democrats are in favor of support for Ukraine. I think the majority of the American people favor Ukraine more than Russia in this situation. But I think Trump is trying to achieve, a negotiated solution, and that involves give and take on both sides.
So how do you see it then? You said give and take on both sides. Do you think both of them are going to budge, and how do you think?
It's going to take some time. I think this agreement about mineral rights was certainly not a ceasefire in itself and not an end to the conflict, but it could have been an important first step because it would give the United States a greater stake in the outcome and give President Trump something to show to his own base, saying, look, we have an interest here, an economic interest in achieving peace in the long term. I think the Europeans will certainly play an important role, whether it's in terms of putting people on the ground to help enforce a peace. That'll be forthcoming, perhaps. But, it's going to be a give and take process over a period of months. But somebody's got to make a move soon because right now there's a stalemate.
And getting back to the comments on gambling potentially with World War III, how serious do you think that is?
Well, anytime you have nuclear weapons at stake, that is a big gamble. Ironically, Ukraine used to have nuclear weapons, and there was an agreement in 1994 whereby they would give up their nuclear weapons in exchange for security guarantees. Now, they did give up the weapons, but they didn't get the security guarantees, unfortunately. Some people think if they had been allowed to keep some nuclear weapons, they might have been better protected over the long term. But of course, Russia still has plenty of nuclear weapons, and anytime that's part of the equation, that's a very dangerous scenario. And of course, NATO on its end has nuclear power as well. So we certainly don't want it to ever get to that kind of a nuclear conflict.
Deputy Press Secretary of President Clinton, Jim Kennedy, thank you so much for joining us in New York.
Thank you.